take this farmer. This farmer has a field, he has a sack of seeds, and he has a vision in his mind for the harvest to come. However, he looks up in the sky and he sees clouds. Maybe a little too much wind today, not enough sun. So he waits, because the conditions aren't ideal for him. And he tells himself, I'll sow them tomorrow. I'll begin once the weather is better, once I'm ready and once everything aligns together. But tomorrow then turns into next week, and then next week turns into next season, and then next year. And the field will eventually remain empty. There's so much potential in the field, but never a single crop planted, never a product sowed. That farmer is That farmer is a broad mainstream representation of us. It's a person who's waiting for the perfect moment to begin. There's a line from Ecclesiastes which cuts very deep into this tendency. Whoever watches the wind will not plant. Whoever looks at the clouds will not reap. In other words, I'm telling you to stop waiting, because all you're doing is losing time. The weather doesn't owe you any clarity. Life doesn't owe you any certainty, and your future certainly doesn't feel... Because the weather doesn't owe you some clarity. Life doesn't owe you some certainty. And for 100% I can tell you this, your future will not wait for you to feel ready. You will have to plant the seed anyway. We are quite conditioned nowadays, almost trained in a way to believe that action must be followed or must follow behind readiness. That the stars must align before I start. That, if not, I'm not confident, why should I start? We shouldn't start if you're not confident. However, this mindset isn't some sort of caution. Instead, it's paralysis dressed up as prudence. You hear it in language every single day. People saying things like, I'm not ready yet, now's not the right time, when I figured things out, once I'm out of school, blah, blah, blah. But the paradox is that you do not figure things out before the beginning. You figure things out by beginning. Clarity is the thing that comes after the step, not before it. Inaction becomes a comfort zone that you live in. Not because it's pleasant, instead it's often miserable. Inaction is quite a dead thing, But instead it's because it feels safe, safer than risk, safer than embarrassment, and safer than failure. What we forget, however, in this, this bliss, is that waiting comes at a cost. Every single moment that you hesitate is a moment that you could have been growing something, growing a skill, growing a project, a relationship, or maybe even a life. There is no such thing as that perfect moment. That is just the moment when you decide that everything is good enough. That's the moment when you decide that you are ready. Albert Camus once said that real generosity towards the future lies in giving everything to the present. Most people do not wait for a life that will justify their effort. Instead, they want assurance that as soon as they plant the seed, it will grow. That as soon as they try, they will succeed. Nature doesn't work like that, and don't believe that it does, because your life won't work in the same way. Life does not guarantee outcomes. All it guarantees is possibilities. And the thing is that every single seed that you do not plant is a harvest that you've already lost. There's a deeper fear behind waiting. It's not simply about conditions. It's about that vulnerability of investing yourself into something. Investing passion and time and risk factors into something that you are uncertain about. Because once you sow something, that book, that business, a piece of your heart even, you risk watching it fail. There's a factor in your mind that tells you, wow, this could fail and I'll lose that part of myself. You risk that rejection, and you risk seeing clearly that the dream in your head didn't survive the journey into reality. So you wait, because waiting allows you to keep that fantasy alive in your mind. It allows you to continue living in that blissful ignorance. That fantasy is your prison. Understand that. Because as long as it stays in your head, it doesn't need to face any sort of elements. Now, I'm sure you've heard that saying, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. However, the truth is a lot harsher than that. Perfect is the enemy of absolutely anything. Nothing worth doing happens under ideal conditions. You grow in the rain, you push forwards in the dark, you build with those trembling hands and those uncertain hearts. And even when the weather turns against you, even when the first crop will fall, you learn and you adapt, and then you apply that and try again. Because real progress, real life, isn't about some sort of control. Instead, it's about commitment. There's also a quote often attributed to Goethe, which says, whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has a genius. Boldness has power and magic in it. However, the key word in that quote is begin. Because if you wait for boldness to arrive before you move, then you'll never move. You'll be waiting forever. However, if you move anyway in the face of boldness, then you will find it along the way to join your path. The road builds under your feet as you walk, not before. Think of it like, this is just an analogy off my head. Think of it like Pokemon. You're never going to get fucking Arceus or something on whatever. You're never going to get a good Pokemon until you walk along that path and you fight the trainers along the way, and you face these adversaries and you fight them and you win, or if you lose, you adapt. I'm yapping here, but I think you understand the concept that I'm talking about. Imagine some sort of artist that waits to feel inspired before he acts. The writer which waits to feel confident before they write their next book. The partner which waits until they're fully whole. Those people will never create, and they'll never write, and they will never love. And they'll always be waiting for that weather that will never arrive. And the years will pass, and the field will stay empty. Eventually, and they'll say these exact words. A lot of people have said these things. It's too late now. The reason it's too late is because you've been putting it off for so long. The truth is that it's never been too late. It's only been too still. There is no moment in your life more powerful than the one that you're in right now, and the one that you are wasting right now doing absolutely nothing. Seneca warned us that life is long enough if you know how to use it. However, most people spend it watching clouds. Most people spend it measuring the wind or forecasting their feelings. And there's a reason farmers plant in spring, even though they know there will be storms. They trust in the process. They trust in the progress that will come. They trust in something that will grow. Not because the world is a fair place, which they can confirm, but instead because they did that work and they understand that. So I'm telling you right now to do the work and write that draft, or send that message, or start that business, or even have that hard conversation with that person that you're avoiding. Make the first move, message them, do any of these things. I know one of them must apply to you if you've watched this far into the video. And not because you're feeling ready, but because your life will never wait for you to feel ready. Because hesitation is silent erosion, and the only cure for that erosion is movement. You never have to be reckless. You don't have to plant blindly in the wrong places, but you do have to stop waiting for everything to make sense before you act. The farmer who waits for that perfect weather will never grow their seed, and the thinker who waits for perfect clarity will never write a single word. So start now, while the sky is cloudy and overcast, while your hands are shaking, while the outcome is still fairly uncertain. Because once you sow that seed, something will shift, the field will change, and you will change. And maybe, just maybe, for once in your life, that seed will become something that you can never imagine yet. Because you'll only be able to imagine it once you're along that path. However, none of that I just said will matter unless you plant that seed. So plant it. Do it for yourself.